Hello everybody, it's Clara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with my May wrap-up. I think it's May. And I didn't read a ton of books in May, and a couple of the ones I did I can't tell you about yet, so I actually can do this all in one part, which is very exciting for everyone involved. The first book I read was Why I Am Not Going to Buy a Computer by Wendell Berry. This is in the Penguin Modern Classics series, which are these very short nonfiction works. I think they're all nonfiction, and this one is of course about why he's not going to buy a computer, and specifically for like why he's not going to buy one and why he's not going to like use that as a writer, like why he doesn't feel like he needs to kind of upgrade. And I haven't given this a star rating yet, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to, just because I am very conflicted about this essay. I have really mixed feelings on it. On the one hand, I appreciate what he's trying to say about like not using things, not buying things, not like getting pulled in to things that don't serve you and don't serve your craft, and I understand that. But there are some parts where I feel like, and when was he writing this? But anyway, as I was saying, I also though feel like there are quite a few parts where he doesn't seem to acknowledge that there are good things that are brought about by technology or by like modern life or different advancements. I don't know, and I do really agree with like kind of the things that he's saying and how they connect to like sustainability or just like a proper respect for like resources and things like that. So there are parts I agree with, but there's parts that I don't. Like it feels a little bit like, I don't know, like these kids and their computers, you know? And in this essay he actually like includes some answers that he got, like some letters that he received in response to his essay, Why I Am Not Going to Buy a Computer, which I thought was interesting. And he addresses those, and he addresses some of the criticisms from people. And there's one that is, well, there are several actually, but one he picked out that is very offended by the way that Wendell Berry like refers to his wife, because he talks about how like he gives his handwritten manuscripts to his wife, who like types them up and like edits them and stuff, which is kind of funny because like then somebody is still using some kind of word processor, but it's just not him. And so this person who wrote the letter is thinking that his way of like viewing his wife and kind of using her as his computer instead is not the best. And then when Wendell Berry responds to that, he's talking about how like he points out how in his essay there at no point does he like say that you should just use a wife instead of a computer, and like he says that like people are assuming that this isn't an equal partnership, and like his points that he makes are true, like are very good. And I think from his response it's pretty clear that Wendell Berry does respect his wife and doesn't treat her as like just a computer. But I think like there's no way to have been able to tell that from his original essay. So I kind of feel like his response to the criticism was good, but I don't think he was acknowledging that like the people making those criticisms had no way of knowing those weren't true, you know? Anyway, I'm just like very conflicted about this. I have talked so long about this tiny little essay. I am still looking forward to reading more by this author, and I do kind of get like some of the core ideas about like the back of the book describes it as arguing for a life lived slowly and the value of home. And yes, I agree with that, and I think some of that comes through in this essay, but there are other parts that like I just think he's not acknowledging, for one thing, that other people don't have the same kinds of choices and resources as each other. Another point he makes that I think is good is he talks about like he's writing against these like big businesses and corporations and like strip mining and all of that, and so how can he buy a product that is only possible because of those things? And I think that is also an interesting and a good point. So I'm just all over the place, haven't rated it yet. I don't know. Next, I finished The Parker Inheritance by Varian Johnson. This is a contemporary book, but we also get flashbacks that are historical fiction. We're following our main character, Candace, and she finds a letter in her, I think it's her grandmother's attic. And this leads her to learning more about her grandmother and why she left town under disgrace because of something she did while she was working at the city, like the city office or city department. And her and her new friend Brandon end up getting pulled into this kind of like mystery scavenger hunt quest sort of thing. They refer to the Westing game, which I haven't read yet, but it's kind of like that sort of flavor. And it leads them to a family named the Washingtons, who were a black family living in this town of Lambert, South Carolina, a few decades decades ago who were actually run out of town. And so they end up like learning more about that and how that connects to this letter and everything. And yeah, I had previously read Playing the Cards You're Dealt by Varian Johnson, which actually he published after this one, and I loved that. That was one of my favorite contemporary books that I read that year, and so I was really excited to get to this one. I had heard fantastic things about it, and I did really enjoy it. I really like Candace and Brandon as characters. I like their friendship. I like the way that through their friendship and through the story, in addition to like the more emphasized like topics and like themes that this book deals with, we also touch on other things, like Brandon getting bullied, and also like friendships between boys and girls, and also toxic masculinity. That's something that Playing the Cards You're Dealt was about much more obviously, which I loved, but we still touch on that here, which I really enjoyed as well. I thought the family dynamics were interesting, and I do really love what this book says about like the past and how you can only sort of start to heal from that by acknowledging it and knowing it and saying what happened, like telling the truth. I really liked that. And I did like some parts of the mystery and the historical aspects. The reason I say some though is because it got like pretty convoluted at some parts, and especially because of the way that the flashbacks were done. Like there were actual, like the sections of the flashbacks were often very interesting depending on the character we were following. So I liked those, even though I'm not always a fan of flashbacks. But the way that that plus the mystery kind of came together, I don't know, I was very confused during some parts of it, which I think definitely did affect my experience with the book. So overall, I really liked the characters, and I also really love Varian Johnson's writing. I love the themes, but I don't feel like the mystery and the flashback sections were always super effective, or weren't as effective as I was hoping they would be based on what I know other people have said about this book. But I still really enjoyed it, and I gave The Parker Inheritance 4 stars. Next, I finished The Eternal Return of Clara Hart by Louise Finch. This is a sort of like contemporary speculative book because it reads completely like a contemporary except for this one big speculative element that is like part of the premise. And we are following our main character Anthony, who basically gets stuck in a time loop. He doesn't understand why or like what's happening, but he just keeps getting stuck in reliving the same day over and over again. That involves like things happening at school, and then a house party, and then a girl, Clara Hart, getting drunk and ending up dead. And he keeps reliving the same day with sometimes things happening a little differently, but he can't break out of this loop, and he can't seem to save Clara. And that's like primarily what this book is about, and I am so glad that Aoife from Words of Clover reviewed this one, because I don't think I've heard anyone else talk about it, and I absolutely loved this. I thought this was fantastic. I think this is such a great example of using speculative fiction to tell a story that you need that for, like especially combined with a contemporary and with the issues that this deals with. By the way, all of the content warnings for these books I will put in the description, and this one does deal with things like misogyny and rape culture and assault. Like it deals with these really big and heavy ideas in a way that is just so thoughtful and so well done, and that works perfectly with like the plot of this story. And I will say also, like, Anthony is not an especially likable character at the beginning, and he's supposed to be. Like, that's how he's written deliberately, and I think the way that Louise Finch wrote him and wrote his progression through this repeated day was done so, so well. And I also just think in terms of the, like, repetition, I think it was done so well. I think it would be very easy for that to become boring. Like he's literally in a time loop and stuck to relive the same day every day. But the way that the narration is done and the different parts that we focus on, the things that we see that are changed or that are the same, I just think that was so well done. Like I really, really found that engaging and interesting, and I never got bored. And I was so invested in seeing like what happened and like hoping that he would be able to save Clara, and getting to know Clara more in her own right, and just like getting to see all of these other characters and seeing them in different situations. Like I just absolutely love this and all of the things that it had to say. I also think that even though Anthony is the main character, the way that it handles some of these issues, and some of these issues where like other people are like the victim or the person suffering from something, I feel like this story still centers the right people, even though it is from Anthony's perspective. I also think this book talks a lot about how people can change and some people can't or don't, or like they just they aren't willing to. And I think it's something that this book does especially well is it connects the more insidious like examples or representations of things like rape culture and misogyny, and it takes those things that are like less obvious and shows how they are all part of the same problem. I just thought this was absolutely incredible, and I gave The Eternal Return of Clara Hart 5 stars. Also, I don't think I mentioned this, but I believe this author is based in the UK, and I think that's where the book is set as well. Next, I finished volume 1 of The Girl from the Other Side by Nagabe. This is the first book in a manga series that I've been meaning to get to for a long time. I've owned several volumes for a long time, and I finally read one. And I really enjoyed this. I understand both why it is recommended for fans of The Ancient Magus Bride, but simultaneously, I loved this so much more. Like, I actually DNF'd that other series recently, and so even though I think some of the vibes are the same, personally, I feel like this book executed the concept a lot better. And they're not, like, trying to do the same thing. I'm just saying that if we're comparing them, the things that really bothered me in Ancient Magus Bride are not present in this one, which I love. So we are following this little girl, and this is set in a fantasy world where there is the outside and the inside. The outside is where all of these like dangerous beasts are, and if you are touched by someone, by like an outsider, you become cursed as well and you turn into a monster. And our other main character is kind of one of these monsters, although maybe he's not really a monster. And he has kind of ended up sort of adopting this little girl who is still a human. So it's kind of like a father-daughter relationship, and it is incredibly lovely, but they have to be really careful about like how he takes care of her, because if he touches her, then she will of course turn into a monster. And that's kind of where we're at. This is a pretty short volume, so not a ton has happened yet, but I'm already really enjoying this. I do really like the art style. I'm not sure if you can see that, but I enjoyed the art. I loved our main characters. I love the really sweet and lovely relationship, and I think like the world and the concept is really interesting. So I'm excited to continue, and I gave The Girl from the Other Side volume 1 4 stars. Next, I read a graphic novel, and that is Numb to This, a memoir of a mass shooting by Kinder Neely. So this is exactly what it says. This is a memoir by Kinder Neely about being a survivor of a mass shooting. It was one of the ones that it happened in Oregon, and yeah, like I hate that no matter when I would review this book, it could be very, very topical. Like no other country lives like this, and it is enraging, but this was a really, really fantastic memoir. I think this is a book that should be assigned in schools, or you know what, this book should be assigned to lawmakers. That's what I mean. Yeah, so anyway, this is, like, I understand why a lot of people don't rate memoirs. I've said before that I am going to rate them until I get to one that I feel like my rating and the value of the story, or like of this person telling their story, are different. So far that hasn't been a problem. So I did give Numb to This 5 stars. Again, I understand why people don't rate memoirs, but I do think that this was a really well done one. And this memoir, it obviously deals with the aftermath and what it means to be a survivor of this kind of traumatic event. And it also deals a lot with like the media coverage and the way that other people respond, and the way that other people think they're helping, but maybe they're not. Maybe they're not even listening to what people need. Also deals with depression a lot, and I list content warnings, as I said, but I want to specifically mention that there is an on-page suicide attempt. So just be aware of that, and if any of this would be triggering for you, then I would recommend not picking this graphic novel up. It is obviously very heavy, but yeah, I think it is really important and really well done. I don't remember if I showed the art style, but I do think it was good, and I think it suited the story. So I don't really know what else to say about this one, apart from I think it was incredibly well done, and I think it's a very necessary memoir. And I think that it covers the things that you would expect, but also the aspects of these violent attacks that you don't always necessarily think about. So yeah, I gave it 5 stars. I would highly recommend it, as I said, especially to some people in our government. And I also want to mention that I think I heard about that one from Amanda, the Curly Reader, which I'm very glad of, because I don't think I had heard anyone else talk about it. So I hope it gets a lot more attention. Next, I finished The Late Mrs. Willoughby by Claudia Gray. This is the second book in a mystery series. I'm very glad that this is a series now. The first book was The Murder of Mr. Wickham, and this is following the same main characters but a different mystery. And I actually received this copy in exchange for an honest review, so I will link that review down below. It is spoiler free, and check that out if you want like more in-depth thoughts. So as I said, we are following the same main characters as the first book, Juliet and Jonathan, and they are the children of some of the characters from Jane Austen's novels. And here they are thrown together again, and they find themselves solving another murder mystery. They're all here for a house party, or like kind of a welcoming party, and while there, Mrs. Willoughby ends up being poisoned, and she dies, and Jonathan and Juliet end up working together again to solve the mystery, even though the circumstances are different. And I really enjoyed this. I thought it was very well done. I feel like this book did a really good job of, like, we're still following the same characters and it is another murder mystery, but I feel like I got to enjoy the same character dynamics, while also this book did kind of address the fact that, like, okay, well, the situation, like, the reason that they ended up solving the first mystery together is because they were the only two whose alibis they knew checked out. Like, so they were the only ones who they knew couldn't have done it, and so that's why they ended up working together. And I feel like this book, like, addressed the fact that, like, well, now we kind of just want to solve this mystery. And I also feel like, in addition to being a very interesting mystery, the characters did acknowledge that even though this is something that they are good at and that they want to continue doing, it's something horrible, you know? Like, it's not, like, they're not, like, getting enjoyment out of, like, solving somebody's murder. And I appreciated that, and I also just really love our main characters, and I enjoyed seeing their interactions and seeing how they're more comfortable with each other since, again, like, the events of the first novel. I also want to mention that Jonathan is autistic, and I have seen Own Voices reviewers say that the representation is done well, and I also enjoyed seeing, like, the way that Claudia Gray writes this time period. Like, for one thing, as I said about the first book, it's just fun to see Jane Austen characters, like, in a mystery setting, but also I feel like she did a really good job of, like, making the time period matter. Like, it affects the way the characters will, like, do things or, like, make choices. And, like, for example, Juliet is pretty young, but she is at an age where she's expected to be thinking about marriage. And so even though all of these other things are happening, she kind of has to have in the back of her head, like, I should be making connections so that I can hopefully find somebody that I respect and have affection for. I just thought that felt very realistic. As far as, like, the mystery and the solution, I liked some parts. I didn't like others, though, specifically the way that, like, I just have very different opinions about some of the characters from Jane Austen's novels. Like, there's one in particular where it's like, I think there's a choice that, like, kept me from, like, fully getting on board with, like, the solution of the mystery. But overall, I did, like, I didn't have a problem with how it came together. I just, again, there was that one character where it's like, Claudia Gray, we are going to have to agree to disagree. But anyway, I did overall enjoy this. Again, I have a whole review, and I gave The Late Mrs. Willoughby 4 stars. And finally, the last book I finished in May was Triss's book. This is the second book in the Circle of Magic Quartet by Tamora Pierce. This is part of the read-along that I'm doing along with Beautifully Bookish Bethany and a bunch of other lovely people. I will link our live show down below, and yeah, this is the second book, and this is, like, following Triss more than the other characters, but all of the books in the series have kind of had, like, their focus point of view, but then we're also still following the rest of the children as well, and I just continue to love this series so much. I'm so happy I'm finally reading it. This is by far my favorite Tamora Pierce series I've read so far, and Triss is such an interesting character. I mean, all of them are. I don't know that I have any, like, different thoughts. Like, I am consistently enjoying, like, everything about these books. Like, I love the writing. I think Tamora Pierce does such a good job of giving you the exact correct amount of, like, description and setting and all of that. I think, like, the culture and the history of this world and these different groups of people is so well thought out. I love these characters so much. I love the characterization, like, the kids and the adults who are kind of their teachers and caretakers. I just love their relationships and, like, how, like, healthy and healing they are, and I just, like, adore all of these kids so much. And I also think this series is a great example of how you can have, like, well-written, thoughtful, complex characters who are kids and adults in the same book. Like, I feel like, you know, sometimes in middle grade, the adults are just, like, obstacles, and sometimes in adult books, like, the kids are there just as, like, set dressing almost. And this is a middle grade series where I really feel like the adults and the kids are, like, equally well written, even though obviously we spend a lot more time with the kids as the main characters. I also find the magic super interesting. I love the character development. I love the themes. I might have to do, like, a whole series review after I finish this series because, like, I am loving this so much and I have a lot of thoughts. I realize I didn't talk at all about the plot of this one, but basically our main characters are trying to prepare for a pirate attack that they think is coming. And Trist also ends up meeting her cousin again, who's trying to get her to like go back to her family, but Trist like doesn't really want to go back because they, you know, threw her out, and also she has people that she cares about now, and who care about her, and I thought that was done just really, really well. In terms of the plot, I guess like I find the plot of this one slightly less compelling than the first book, but like everything is equally well done. I love this book so much. Like, I still gave it 5 stars, you know? So yeah, I am absolutely loving reading this series for the first time as an adult, and yeah, just having a wonderful time. Okay, everybody, so those were all of the books that I read in May. It feels so weird to be able to do all of the books I read in one wrap-up, but please comment down below and let me know if you've read any of these, what your thoughts are. Let me know a book that you have very conflicted feelings about, like why I'm not going to buy a computer, and or let me know if you have discovered an author or a series recently that is like not a new release, like it's been out for a while, but you are like discovering it for the first time, and you're just like having a wonderful time, because obviously like I am loving the Circle of Magic series, and I am so glad that I am now reading Tamora Pierce as an adult. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!